Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 28 from the Road to Latin textbook. Now the first story of chapter 28 is called Pueri et Pater. Before we dive into the story though, like I always tell you, if you want to get more resources on the chapter, get some grammar problems, vocab help, things like that, feel free to check out Nova Latin. You can find all my stuff there. It'll just help you through. You can of course find this textbook. Usually like a normal version on things like Google Books. It's out of copyright. Mine has a little more stuff that I've put and used in my class. So if you find it helpful, feel free to use it. Otherwise, whatever you need to do, go for it. Before you dive into the story, though, I always say the best thing you can do is make sure you know the vocab. So take a look at the vocab list, practice it, practice some old vocab too if you need to. But it's really hard to understand what's going on, no matter how good your grammar is, if you just don't know what the words mean. So first step should always be vocab. Then you want to take a look at the grammar, make sure you work your way through it and practice it. The story will show you the grammar and context, which is also a good way to do it. But of course, you can always look through the notes. Feel free to take a look at mine if you want to get a little overview of the grammar. That's where we're going to start in this video. I'll give you a quick overview of perfect tense, then we'll dive into the story. But before you get into the story, I would always recommend you read this aloud, right? So if you can find someone in class, a classmate, whoever, read the story aloud to work on your speaking and pronunciation, right? And then if they can read it back to you, you can work on your listening skills. Those will really help you with understanding Latin. I always say you don't want to shut those skills off and only translate in your head or only look at, like a dictionary, things like that. Bring the language to life. It's meant to be spoken, and it'll help you really catch the patterns and understand what's going on. And you'll start to hear the Latin a lot better too. So anything you can do to help yourself, that would be great. The other method I always tell my students to use is read and reread. So read through the story once, write down any problem areas you're having, whether it's vocab, grammar, whatever it is. Then go look those up, right? So look up the words you don't know, make sure you practice them, look up any grammar you're not understanding, and then read the story again 2, 3, 4 times, as many times as you need. But on that second or third read, whenever it is, you should be able to read through this without needing a dictionary to look up the words and without needing any grammar help. You should be able to get pretty close, okay? Once you're in that place, you can feel comfortable that you understand what's going on in this chapter. So like I said, before we dive into the story, I want to give you a quick review of this chapter's grammar. So in this chapter, we're diving into a new tense. It's called the perfect tense. If you want an overview of it, I've made a YouTube video on this. You can feel free to go check it out, right? On my site, you'll see it. But it'll give you an overview of how it all works. Just to give you a quick review, right? Again, you want to read the grammar notes or watch my video, but the quick version is this. The perfect tense is another tense in the past, right? But it's talking about completed past action. So the difference I always tell my students between imperfect and perfect is the same as the difference between a photo and a movie. So in other words, if you want to go back and see what happened on your third birthday, you could either look at a photograph of yourself blowing out the candles and say, hey, there I am, eating my birthday cake or whatever. Or you could watch a video of it. They're both in the past, but the video is giving you sort of a span of time. Okay, that's one way to think about the imperfect tense. It's over a period of time. It could be repeated action, things like this, but the perfect tense is a completed action, okay? And in English, we translate this with what we call normally like our simple past ending. So instead of, I watch, you'd say I watched. That's the perfect tense ending. Okay, but to form the perfect tense and recognize it in Latin, you want to go to the third principal part of the verb, and we'll talk about that in a second. You just drop the long I ending, right? That long I technically is your first person singular perfect ending, but however you want to think about it, that I is going to get replaced with different endings depending on who the speaker is, right? Which person using. So the perfect tense endings go e, isti, it, imus, istis, eram, right? And it means I, you, he, she, it, we, you, all, and they. And you can see on the chart below. So that's all you have to do. Go to the third principal part and change the ending around. The good news about Latin verbs is they all have a unique third principal part, but there's no pattern or changing. Whatever that third part is, that's what you use for perfect tense. You just change the endings. There's no vowel flips, anything like that. So once you get used to it, perfect tense is actually pretty easy to recognize. The endings are pretty distinct. And I'll show you, there's a little bit of overlap. We might get a little confused, but in general, it's really not that bad. So we just talked about principal parts of a verb. This is what it looks like. And again, you can check it. I have a separate video on this as well. But when you talk about principal parts, right, these are the pieces we list in dictionaries to help us understand and use Latin verbs, right? So the first three are the first person singular present tense. That's the first part, ambulo. The second part is your infinitive, right, ambulare. The third part is what we're using for perfect tense. This actually is the first person singular perfect tense, right? So ambulavi means I walked. Now that part, the third part, is pretty different for every verb. There is a little bit of a pattern. So like, for instance, first conjugation verbs tend to have an AVI right there as their ending. You'll catch on to it pretty quickly, but you actually don't need to know any sort of pattern to do perfect tense. Whatever that third principal part is in the dictionary, just add the endings and you're fine. Okay. And again, the fourth part we haven't included in this chart. It's something you'll learn later, but there is another principal part as well. For now, you just need the third one to do perfect tense. So this is what it would look like if you're looking for examples. Okay. So in the chart to the right above, you have 5 verbs, right? A first, a second, a third I, and a fourth conjugation. Now, it actually doesn't matter. Again, the conjugation doesn't matter because whatever that third principal part is, that's where you start. So if you wanted to take ambulare, for instance, our first column, the third principal part is ambulavi. So our answers go ambulavi, ambulavisti, ambulawit, ambulavimus, ambulavistis, and ambulaverunt, right? E isti it, emus istis errant. That's all we did. Same thing goes for sedere, right? Sedi, sedisti, sedit. For auto, odere, right? Oddity, oddidisti, and down the line. There's no vowel flips, no changes, nothing. They're all using the same ending. So this is why I'm saying perfect tense is actually a little bit easier to understand and to use, right? In English and Latin. It kind of makes sense. And there's not, to form it in Latin is not particularly difficult. So that's the quick overview. If you want more help, feel free to check out my website. I have all my notes there, different explanations and practice problems, and you'll be able to do this pretty well. Just wherever you need to do, review it, make sure you feel comfortable, and you'll see as we go through the story, basically every verb in here, or most of them, are perfect tense to help you kind of see this in context. Okay, so we're going to dive into the story now. If you haven't read the story on your own, go back and do it. You should use this part of the video just as a quick review to make sure you are on the right track. But the story goes like this. You have cur aule, librum domum portavisti, rogavit Cornelius, ubi pueri aluda venerunt. So it starts with a quote. You have cur, why, right? So why aulis, there's your vocative aule. Why portavisti, the V in portavisti is giving it away as being perfect tense, and also the isti ending. So remember, you go e isti, it. This is second person singular, which makes sense because someone is talking to someone else. We have quotation marks. So it's saying, why aulis, did you carry, right? Portavisti, why did you carry a librum domum? Librum is your direct object, right? A book. Domum is just telling you homeward, right? Home. So it's saying, why did you carry a book home? Then you have rogavit. Again, this is perfect tense. You can tell because there's a V in the middle of it and has that IT ending. So it's not ask, but asked, right, with the ED. So why did you carry a book home, asked Cornelius, when the boys, the pueri, venerunt. There we go. Erunt is perfect tense, right? It comes from the third principal part of venire. You have the erunt ending. So it's when the boys came from school, right? Aludo, from school, meaning they came home from school. So portavisti, rogavit, and venerunt are all perfect tense, okay? So there's a good chance to kind of get used to seeing it in action. Then you have another quote. You have librum domum portavi, quod fabulam in ludo legi et maxime amavi, responded Aulus. So he says, portavi, I carried a librum, a book home, right? Librum domum, right? I carried the book or a book home because legi, I read, again, the long I tells you this is perfect tense. I read the fabulam, the story, in ludo, in school. And amavi, perfect tense, the VI gives it away. And I liked, or I loved it, maxime, very much. So he says, I brought the book home because I read a story in school and I really liked it. So I brought it home. Now here you have responded Aulus. This is probably present tense because if you think about it, the two people are kind of having a conversation with each other. But it actually could be perfect or present. They look exactly the same. And if you go to the textbook and take a look, you'll see my notes on this. So you can either say responds Aulus if you want it to be like in the present moment, or you could say responded Aulus. It would actually be the same idea. Okay. Then you have num, nos fabulam audivimus aule, rogaverunt parvi pueri. Now you have a yes or no question coming from the num, right? So the subject is nos, and it's going with audivimus, so we heard the story, the fabulum aulus. The num means like, did we hear the story or we didn't hear it yet? It's kind of one way to think about it. You could almost say like, we didn't hear the story, did we, aulus, right? They're expecting that no answer. You have rogaverunt parvi pueri, asked the little boys. Okay, again, rogaverunt is perfect tense. Then you have the response with fortasse fratres parvi. Fabulam audivistis, responded Aulus. So he says, perhaps, small brothers, right? Fratres parvi, it's vocative. He says, perhaps, little brothers, you heard, you all, audivistis, right? You all heard the story, responds Aulus, right? So he says, maybe you did, right? Perhaps you heard the story. Then it continues, and you have quam fabulam legisti aule. So what So again, here you're saying you read, right? Remember, e isti it. So you read which story, or literally you can almost say which story did you read? Kind of works a little bit better. So he says, which story did you read, or what story did you read, Alice? So they said, did we hear the story? He's like, you might have. So they say, hey, which one did you read, right? Which story did you read, Alice? And there's a response here, but it's not from Alice. You have Aulus fabulam de Aenea, right? Aenea et Ascanio legit clamavet Lucius. So Aulus read, right? Legit here is perfect tense. Again, this is a little tricky because it looks like present tense, but it's perfect here. You're saying Aulus read a story about Aeneas and Ascanius, clamavet Lucius, right? Shouted Lucius. So this other brother chimes in and responds for him. They say, hey, what story did you read? And Lucius responds, the other one who's with Alice, and says, oh, he read a story about Aeneas and Ascanius. Okay. Then you have another quote. You have nos quoque pueri inquit Cornelius, fabulam de Aenea legimus. So the father is now going to chime in. You have we, right? Nos, we too, boys, said Cornelius, or says Cornelius. We too, legimus, we read, again, perfect tense, legimus, the I am you ascending. So we read a story about Aeneas. So Cornelius, the dad, says, yeah, we also read a story about Aeneas, boys. Then you have pater me adolescentem, inquit Marcus, Athenas misit. So father sent misit. There is perfect tense. You can tell because this is mito mitere, and misit with the S is the third principal part, right? So it has to be perfect tense. So it's saying father sent me, a young man, adolescentem, right? A young person, or in my youth, you might say, right? As an adolescent. Athenas, to Athens. Remember, when you have the name of a city with accusative case, you don't need a preposition. The accusative means towards Athens, right? Or to Athens. So Marcus said, yeah, father sent me to Athens as a young man. Ibi tabulam de Aenea et Sociis vidi. So there, meaning in Athens, I saw, vidi, right? It's perfect tense. I saw a tabulum. It's sort of like a painting almost, a picture, you might say, right? A tabulum. I saw a picture of Aeneas and his allies, right? Aenea et Sociis, right? Aeneas and his allies. Then you have vos pueri inquit Cornelius, claram fabulum de principis Romae legistis. So you have you all rather, vos, you all boys, says Cornelius, right? You all legistis, you all read a claram fabulum, a famous story about the principis Romae, about the beginnings of Rome, okay? The beginnings of Rome has to do with Aeneas, right? So that's what they're referencing here. Then you have the last line. You have semper pueri Romani fabulam de Aenea legerunt. So always the pueri Romani, Roman boys, read, right? Legerunt is perfect tense. So they always read the story of Aeneas, the fabulam de Aenea, right? The story about Aeneas. So you're saying always little boys read this story. Okay, so there's a lot of perfect tense happening, not a lot in terms of plot development. It's really just a conversation, because the conversation gives the book an easy way to give you all the different versions of perfect tense, right? I, you, we, all these things. But if you read through it, you're trying to really focus in on perfect tense. Can you recognize it? Can you translate it? Do you understand what's going on? That's really what you're after in this chapter. Okay, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below. Otherwise, keep at it, keep practicing. And like I said, if you can read through this without needing a dictionary or any grammar help, that's your red flag that you're in a really good place.